How does the war to end all wars lead directly to an even bigger, deadlier conflict just 20 years later? I mean, it's one of history's most tragic ironies, isn't it? Okay, let's get into it and see how the peace that ended World War I actually lit the fuse for World War II.
So, picture this. It's 1919. The world is in ruins. And these guys, the big three, meet at Versailles to try and put it all back together. Their goal, at least on paper, was to create a lasting peace. But, they were also under massive pressure from their own people to make sure Germany could never, ever start another war.
But the treaty they came up with, the Treaty of Versailles, it didn't secure peace at all. No. Instead, it planted these little seeds of resentment and instability that would just grow and grow into the next global catastrophe. This wasn't a solution. It was basically the origin story for the next war. So, let's dig into why this peace was so fragile. We're going to look at how the Treaty of Versailles didn't just fail to solve problems, it actively created a whole host of new ones. It was like they were trying to build a new world order on a foundation of, well, sand.
And you can really boil it down to two major grievances. On one side, you have Germany, absolutely crushed under the weight of Article 231, the famous War Guilt Clause. This forced them to take all the blame, and it became the bedrock for that toxic stab-in-the-back myth later on. Then on the other side, you have Italy. They were supposed to be victors, but they felt totally betrayed, cheated out of the land they were promised for joining the fight. So you've got humiliation on all sides.
And just look at this number, £6.6 billion. This wasn't just a fine, you guys. This was a sum so huge it was designed to completely cripple the German economy for generations. And it worked. This economic punishment led directly to insane hyperinflation, creating a chaos that wasn't just financial, it was psychological. And that kind of chaos, well, it creates opportunities for some very dangerous people.
And that brings us to one of the men who was ready to exploit that chaos, Benito Mussolini. He looked at the new League of Nations, this body designed to prevent future wars, and he saw it for what it was, a total paper tiger, powerless against any real aggression. He knew he was exactly the kind of eagle who could take full advantage of that weakness.
So this post-war instability, it creates the perfect environment, the perfect breeding ground for a new, ruthless type of leader to rise up. And this wasn't just a random grab for power. It was a calculated strategy, a playbook that others would soon be watching very, very closely.
I mean, this was the perfect storm. Just imagine it. Your life savings totally wiped out overnight by inflation. Your national pride shattered. Your government seems completely helpless. Who are you going to turn to? In places like Germany and Italy, people were desperate, and they were ready to listen to anyone offering a simple, powerful, and as it turns out, incredibly dangerous solution.
And what's wild is that this became a repeatable formula. Step 1, you build your own loyal gang of thugs, the black shirts in Italy, the brown shirts in Germany. Step 2, you use propaganda to whip up national fears. Step 3, you target your opponents with violence. And finally, Step 4, you use the chaos you created to demand power through so-called legal means.
And right here, you can see the connection so clearly. Mussolini basically wrote the playbook with his March on Rome back in 1922. A decade later, Hitler was watching, he was taking notes, and he was perfecting the exact same methods in Germany. Two different countries, but the same ruthless path to absolute power.
So, okay, they've seized power. But how do you keep it? Well, this next part is about how these new leaders didn't just want to rule their countries. They wanted to completely remake them from the ground up, with terrifying, absolute control. It's a total takeover. First, you outlaw all other political parties. Then, you create a secret police, the OVRA in Italy, the Gestapo in Germany, to spy on your own people. You control everything they read and everything they hear, and you use sheer terror to crush anyone who even thinks about stepping out of line.
And this is the sinister genius of it all. They offered order, jobs, they even offered a people's car, the Volkswagen, and a return to national greatness. Sounds good, right? But the price for that promise was horrifying. The absolute loss of freedom, and for minorities, a horrifying descent into persecution, ghettos, and ultimately, death camp.
The slogan Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, hanging over the gates of Auschwitz. This is where that ideology of total control and racial purity leads. The promise of a shining new future was a lie. It was a mask for unimaginable horror. This was the reality.
So you have to wonder, how did the rest of the world just let this happen? Well, it wasn't one single moment. It was a series of provocations,
a line being crossed again and again and again, and it was met with inaction and fear. The dominoes just began to fall, one by one.
Just look at this map. First, Hitler sends his troops back into the Rhineland, a direct violation of the Versailles Treaty. The world does nothing. Then he annexes Austria, and again, nothing. He was testing the waters, and he was finding out that they were dangerously shallow.
Every single step on this timeline just emboldened the aggressors. Italy invades Ethiopia. The League is useless. Germany takes back the Rhineland. Crickets. The Munich Agreement is really the climax, where Britain and France literally hand over a piece of Czechoslovakia to Hitler, hoping it'll finally satisfy him. Surely this will be enough, right? Nope, it wasn't.
And then came the moment that made the entire world's jaw hit the floor. This cartoon just perfectly captures the sheer absurdity of it. The two most bitter ideological enemies in Europe, Nazi Germany and the Communist Soviet Union, in this grim embrace. It was a cynical pact not of friendship but of pure convenience, with a secret plan to carve up Poland between them. The final barrier to war was just gone.
With the Soviet Union now on his side, the path was clear. On September 1, 1939, German tanks roll into Poland. The policy of appeasement had failed, catastrophically. The war was on.
The dictators had their war, but the empires they dreamed of building on violence were destined to collapse just as violently. Their rise was meteoric, sure, but their fall would be a vortex of destruction that would pull the entire world down with them.
And a conflict just explodes. It becomes a true world war, with Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, which pulls the United States into the fight. And as the war expanded, the Nazi regime, which once seemed invincible, began to rot from the inside. On the right, you're seeing the aftermath of an assassination attempt on Hitler by his own officers. The cracks were starting to show.
And here we see the fate of the man who started it all, the one who wrote the playbook, Benito Mussolini, the first fascist dictator, who promised to restore the glory of Rome, ends up executed by his own people, his body hung for public display in Milan. A brutal, humiliating end for a brutal regime.
And what a contrast. The dictators are dead, the world they tried to build is gone. And in their place, you have a new set of world leaders. America's Truman, Britain's Attlee, and the Soviet Union's Stalin, meeting to draw the map of a post-war world. A new order, built on the ashes of the old.
So from that flawed peace at Versailles all the way to the devastation of World War II, you can draw a clear, tragic line. We see how resentment, how economic chaos, and how unchecked aggression can literally set the world on fire. The war ended, yes, but the forces that caused it, they haven't gone away. Which really leaves us with one final thought. What lessons from this catastrophe are we still struggling with today?